Safe to say I'm the biggest, the largest. Been stepping on shit since my mama stayed in them apartments. Regardless, my daddy told me keep the heat even when I'm in foreigns. I'm heartless, cause these niggas.
Boom, we are back. Usual suspects, so don't get it confused. This is the Bullish Bitcoin Banter and Bullshit podcast 156, brought to you by Mr. All In, aka the Trillion Dollar Man, myself, Sir Never Look, aka the Excellence of Execution, Dr. Evil 10%, aka the People's Champ, and surprise, surprise, no surprise, Mrs. No Show, nowhere to be seen. What's going on, geez?
Not a lot of news, but then we've had a few things stir up in the last few days, haven't we? Which we're going to talk about.
We have indeed.
I feel like it's nothing until it hits £1 million a coin.
Well, as we move closer and closer to election time, maybe.
And I saw a tweet today. It said gold all-time high, S&P 500 all-time high, and then there's good old Bitcoin just sitting there. So, what's happening? Come on.
Yeah.
But normally it's yeah, was it all? I think it was debt at all-time highs as well. And I think normally Bitcoin is a bit of a lagging indicator on some of those things, but it's normally, it just means the printer is printing and money is flowing into all these assets. And it's a bit interesting because typically at previous cycles Bitcoin would have gone flying at this point. And the nuts thing is you can see the buying.
Yeah.
There's a lot of buyers, but yeah, are we being suppressed by the ETFs? Is there some secret selling going on? Is the government selling? Obviously, we know there's stuff happening, right? There's sizable amounts of Bitcoin that is being sold by America right now. So probably just manipulating the price, but yeah, we know what happens eventually. Because Bitcoin is a scarce asset, there is only so much Bitcoin they can sell. So, but then it is an interesting concept though, because if they have co-opted the exchanges, which largely dictate the price, can they, leverage that just to go, make sure the order book is always, basically competing and suppressing the price. Don't know. There's got to be a tipping point where there's just too many buyers, right? So but is that when Coinbase crashes? Then they just stop people buying. Who knows? The problem, isn't it? Where the price of Bitcoin is largely dependent on the price of state-owned, KYC, AML exchanges that are largely based in the US. So could they be manipulating the price of Bitcoin?
There's got to be a logical answer to it. I don't know what the answer is, but you're absolutely right. I think about this all the time. We've entered a period since the beginning of the ETFs where there's been more buying of Bitcoin, and yet we're only here. And yeah, maybe the price was baked in with regards to that and the halving, but surely we would be a lot higher than we are still right now. And we're not. But there's got to come a time.
But there has been one person buying an absolute shit ton of Bitcoin, and his name is the Giga Chad Michael Saylor. Usually we have him on this pod flexing about how much Bitcoin he's bought. We barely even cover his interviews anymore because we've covered them all. He largely says the same things in every interview, and it's all brilliant stuff, most usually. He's very much a Bitcoin maxi, hates crypto, anti-fiat, anti every other asset. There is no second best. Going up forever, Laura. Never selling. All these famous quotes that have come from Saylor's mouth in these famous interviews. And he turns up this week on October 20th, a couple of days ago, with a random interview with who knows who this woman is, don't even know. But
It's like Australian 60 Minutes, wasn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, it's a nice little professional interview. He's clearly going to
Yeah.
the masses. Isn't like a normal Bitcoiner interview. It is a bit of a normie interview. But I think I'll play the clip because you just got to hear it to believe it.
If there is more Bitcoins held with these third-party custodians, what risk does that pose, having greater supply held by fewer large institutions? Does that increase the risk of seizure and confiscation like we've seen with gold? And is that not exactly what Bitcoiners don't want to happen?
No, I think it's the opposite. I think that when the Bitcoin is held by a bunch of crypto anarchists who aren't regulated entities, who don't acknowledge government or don't acknowledge taxes or don't acknowledge reporting requirements, that increases the risk of seizure. You have an OG crypto community that's very hardcore about it, but if you look at where all the money is, 99.9% of the money is actually in the traditional economy.
If you consider the Great Depression, I mean, people thought that their gold was safe in banks until the Executive Order of 1933. So we're not entirely safe. I mean, I know that's kind of a wild thing to suggest may happen again, but history does repeat itself. So yeah, people's Bitcoin wouldn't be entirely safe. It's
people say that, but mostly it's paranoid crypto anarchists that say that. Okay? Because it's a myth and a trope that goes on over and over again. But first of all, he didn't really seize the gold. People voluntarily turned in the gold. They didn't go and kick in everybody's door, arrest them, shoot them, and take their gold. That never happened. Is the United States on the Bitcoin standard?
Maybe we will be soon.
But the point really is we're not. Right? It's totally not a reasonable comparison. You know, people have these inflammatory, tropes or inflammatory memes that they use, and it's like, I say that because I want you to give me your money. Okay, like if you don't trust the bank, then you'll buy my hardware wallet. If you don't trust this government, you'll move to my country and you'll buy a passport from me. That's the kind of fear mongering to get you to give me your money, right? And I use it to sell you a gun, to sell you a hardware wallet, to sell you an account, to sell you a financial advisor, to sell you an insurance policy, to sell you fill in the blank.
And there he is. Saylor thinks you're a paranoid crypto anarchist if you hold your own keys and don't trust the government. People that keep their Bitcoin on a hardware wallet are the extremists, essentially. Just hold your coins in Coinbase or in an ETF.
She goes on to talk about gold because she brings up gold, the actual interviewer, a few times. And he goes on to talk about gold and he says, what is it? People volunteered their gold. It's not like the government forced them to. I'm pretty sure they put a law in place which said it was made it illegal. So pretty much you could be eating prison food for years if you didn't hand over your gold at a prescribed price. And then once everyone did, or majority did, they repegged the fucking dollar. So literally they debate. So everyone got like, was it $20 a pound or something like that for their gold? They repegged it, because they'd put it on a shit price.
Yeah.
So literally they gave them half of what it was worth. So you can trust your government, can't you?
It was the policy 6102, and for anyone that held over more than 1 ounce of gold, if you were caught with it after a certain date, you would get a $10,000 fine or 10 years in prison, or. So yeah, when faced with that type of threat, of course, and this is what we talk about with Bitcoin, right? We expect the 6102 attack to come against Bitcoin, right? Which one day they will just mandate anything over 10,000 sats, you have to submit it to your local exchange, right? And they will hold it for you and you will get a form of IOU, probably form of some CBD, CBDC, right? Coin that is pegged 1-to-1 with Bitcoin. Don't worry. It'll be pegged 1-to-1 until it isn't. It's exactly what they did with the IOUs of gold. Don't worry, these IOUs, they're pegged to gold. It says on it, look, backed by gold. It says it on it. And then one day they just took that off the note.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure they halved it. They literally halved the value of the money which they'd given the people within a matter of a couple of years.
Yeah, we started doing a fractional reserve on the gold. So Saylor is largely right, which is why it's really triggering, really, because he's right. People did hand it in, but to say that they did it voluntarily and oh yeah, they didn't do it because they knocked on doors and grabbed everyone's gold out of their homes. No, they didn't. They did it by threat. They did it by propaganda, and they did it by people snitching on each other. Rewards were given for you snitching on your friends. And look, we've literally had an example of that during the whole lockdown era.
I was going to say that, yeah.
No, now the
No,
government are turning around
no.
and saying the same thing.
Lockdowns were all good.
Yeah, well, yeah, lockdown, the vaccine thing. It's the same argument on the vaccine that government is saying now. No one was mandated, no one was forced to take the vaccine, and technically they are absolutely correct. But they passed various policies and regulations that said, well, you can't work here, you can't do that job, you can't do this activity, you won't be able to fly on holiday, you won't be able to do all these things. You're basically going to be an outcast from society. So that's why a lot of people then got vaccinated. And you can go, well, none of them were forced. They didn't come around your house, pin you down, and inject you. No, they didn't. But these people were
They restricted everything.
It was to a certain extent, they were pinned down and injected by force because you either lose your job or you take the vax, right?
Well,
So a lot of people went, well, I can't.
With NHS, it was mandatory.
Yeah.
Until
it
a certain
said
proportion.
It was, and then they actually backed off at the final hour. So actually,
that's because you had a number of people who just stood and went, not taking this.
Yeah.
And then they had to, whereas they were doing it by force on there. And then they did it in the armed forces in America. I want to say they did it in certain states where it was over so many people in a company. You had to have it, otherwise was it fines for the actual company? So the company couldn't employ you.
Yeah. So it's nuts, right? It's nuts to use that as an example because the normies will hear that. This is probably the first time they're hearing of the 6102 of the gold confiscation.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh no, it's different. It's different. People wanted to hand their gold over to the banks. They didn't want to be their own banks. No.
It wasn't just hand the money over to gold. It was like they were patriotic. They wanted to give that money to their government.
Yeah. And it's really worrying. This is the kind of thing I would expect from Elizabeth Warren, from Gary Gensler. This spinning of facts and cherry picking a bit of data and going,
exactly.
They handed it back. This is not the same. Bitcoiners wouldn't just hand it back. It's like, no, like people will hand it back if the education is this bad, Saylor. You are
the education
the wrong thing.
The education, the education in the camps.
I mean, we're all here as literally, without sounding egotistical, financial historians, and we know the facts of what actually went on. So to your point, Dr. Evil 10%, yes, people did happily put their money or their gold with the banks, but not for those purposes. And they definitely wanted it back in terms of once they understood the gravity of what actually went on and how they were duped. And it's like people won't actually go into the history of this and they'll just fall blindly into the same trap once again.
We can go for a couple. That gold, it happened what, the 50s or was it the 40s? So they can kind of go, oh, yeah, it happened in the 40s. Long time ago, it won't happen again. So let's fast forward to 2009. Cyprus entered all their citizens' bank accounts and took a haircut of 10,000 euros out of all the accounts over a certain amount. So there's a bit of recent history. In around about 2015, or was it 16, Argentina did the same. So if you had assets over a certain amount, they took a haircut. So that is two recent instances in developed countries. I mean,
and of course, Lebanon as well, where we covered in one of the pods.
Man.
In terms of, people were trying to, they went to the bank, albeit with fake guns, but wanting their money back.
Yeah, and Lebanon was the Paris. Sorry, what's the capital of Lebanon?
Yes, I remember.
I'm trying to remember the name, but it was known as the Paris of the Middle East. So it wasn't just a shithole; it was a really upmarket city where this all happened. I mean, you got Argentina, which was one of the most powerful and successful, Beirut, and then Argentina, which was one of the most powerful countries before it got taken over by socialism. And you're kind of going, you're saying, banks and governments would never do this. It's like there's 3 examples which we just told you, which happened very recently, and then throw in the fact of banks. Banks would never stop people doing anything. You know, you can store your Bitcoin with a bank. So none of the high street banks in the UK have ever stopped people spending their money on Bitcoin. That is a big question. It's all right to gamble, you know, put some money on horses, lose 60,000 on that, but I think we're all right. So I think we can trust the banks and we can trust the government because there's no examples of them doing any wrongdoings when they've had a control over people's money.
Well,
No,
people forget the fact that they're being controlled by the banks on a daily basis by the limits of what they're able to take out and transfer. You know, ultimately, if they had the funds in the bank and they wanted to take out more than at some cash machines, it's 300 or £1,000, you can't do that. And then there's the decrease in actual physical branches to be able to go in to then take the money out as well. I know for me, it's at least a 30-minute car journey to a branch. And then I don't even know what they would give me out of the bank physically without replanning it.
Yeah. So what else did Saylor say in here? So we had the paranoid crypto anarchist. We had
Yeah.
inflammatory memes. I'm like, I thought you liked the inflammatory memes. I love the inflammatory memes. You know, I love sharing them amongst our group. So I mean, we've talked about the negative on this, but look at the other way. I think it's the last post which Mr. Allin shared for the story. What's going on with your background, by the way, Mr. Allin? It seems to be going between normal and black.
I'm about to share my screen. I'm just testing different options. What does this look like? Oh, never mind.
So
it's
shit. Yeah, so it's got you 50-50 of the screen.
Oh, all right. I don't want to do that then.
So yeah, the other side of this, I think the last post in this story which you shared is pretty much, is he trying to legitimize it? Is he playing 4 or 5D chess? And part of me, I don't know if it's the fact that I hope he does after the last few years, or I think he does. I can't work out, you know, what is going on, because he said all this. You know, he hasn't got into Bitcoin because price go up. He's got into it because he believes in the movement, which makes me think maybe there's a lot more to this than we're giving him credit for.
Yeah, because here we are. This is a guy trying to explain it, right? So let's just say he's trying to steal, man, but I think he actually kind of believes it, which I'm not buying it. But he basically says, "Am I the only one who saw Italy double their capital gains tax on?" Oh no, hold on.
You're on the wrong story.
Oh no, story. It's the same guy, but is it?
That one. Oh yeah, mate. So you got the one. Come on, bro.
Right. Oh man. Yeah, so you've got yeah, actually, yeah, it was that Sean Harris. It's weird. Sean Harris has got a tweet about Saylor, which is literally exactly this.
If Saylor's role is to pretend to be a status boomer to protect Bitcoin, then our role is to pretend to call him out as a status boomer. We are protecting Michael while he's blowing his cover.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's like, yeah, is he playing 4D chess, which yeah, essentially is going, yeah, let's play down self-custody, make it a Trojan horse. And then yeah, because he's so visible.
Yeah.
But
this is
He
what I mean.
has spoken like this before.
He did something, didn't he, about a year or two ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, his last line, the last thing he said is that it was basically saying stuff around the US dollar and the fact that fiat and Bitcoin can coexist and Bitcoin could be super successful, but so can the dollar. And you go,
That's
all
right.
right, I will go along with that because clearly it can't. Like the currency and money is very much in whatever region you're in, there tends to be a monopoly around a single currency. Things are denominated, right? The There will only be one global standard of currency. You know, right now it's the US dollar. That's what the majority of things are denominated in global trade. So if we move to a Bitcoin standard, Bitcoin will be the denominator, and that will have the majority of the power, right? All the other coins are, it's a little bit like with gold, right? There was gold that was number one, and then silver was 2% of the value of gold. So yes, silver was number two, but it wasn't close, right? Gold was 50x the value of that. So on that one, you go, okay, he's basically going that the dollar and Bitcoin can coexist, both be successful. And if anything, Bitcoin can make the dollar be stronger in some shape or form. Like if America adopted it and stuff, you go, dude, like there's no scenario where Bitcoin being massive helps America. They have all the advantages they could possibly want by being on a US dollar standard. I mean, to print money out of thin air and then go across the globe and just buy shit up essentially for free because they didn't have to do any work for that money. They just printed it out of thin air. So, but on that one, I could give him a pass. You're like, it doesn't make sense, but I can see what you're doing.
But I felt like when he said that, you could see it was a little bit tongue in cheek and he was playing along with it. Whereas this, I feel like he means the words. He really means the words. Or he's been working with his acting coach 24/7.
Well, yeah, he's slagging us off, isn't he? He's directly slagging us off. And he calls us like he uses the crypto word as well.
Yeah.
Like just that would have been like a big no-no. And he calls us crypto anarchists. He doesn't even call us Bitcoin anarchists.
Yeah.
At least call us Bitcoin anarchists. But we're not anarchists. This is literally it's what I had up just then. Like in the Bitcoin white paper, it's right at the top. In the third line, Satoshi writes in there that Bitcoin is useless if during the transaction of a Bitcoin, you are reliant on a third party. It has to be a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So the second you introduce a third party, you've broken Bitcoin. You're now basically just a form of the financial institution, right? No matter how decentralized all the other pieces are, if there's one third party in the middle, then that now can stop transactions, censor transactions, it could steal the transaction, could put fees on the transaction, could do whatever it wants. Essentially, it becomes a bank, right? It becomes fiat again because this third party, if it is essential to all transactions, it's right in there. Saylor knows this. So to call us anarchists for believing in the first sentence of the Bitcoin white paper is nuts. We're not anarchists, we're just Bitcoiners. And so, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it's like, I don't, until he explains himself.
To be fair, we are anarchists, so aren't we?
We are.
We're against government. We're against government authority.
Yeah, and the main consensus, and I know.
But calling us crypto anarchists is quite insulting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know we were talking about how to title this, and upon watching the videos of Saylor, I got the sentiments of when Bret Hart turned heel against the crowds, and therefore, in our chat, I started looking at, okay, this is what happens when your favorite wrestler turns bad guy. And I've found the top 10. And this is up there. If it turns out that he's gone off script and he is now on the other side, I'm in the crowd just holding my hands in my head and thinking, wow, I did not see this coming. Because we've spoken previously before about everybody that we've put our trust in then goes and lets us down. And the list is long. And I really, really would hate for Saylor to join the top of that pile because it would hurt. Because we believed in him.
Yeah, with he's either playing 4D chess, right? I think it was Max Kaiser called him out because one of the explanations, right? The dark one is that he is a Trojan horse and he's been a Fed the whole time. and he's come into Bitcoin, become a figurehead, talked about all the key talking points. He's super rich. So all he's largely saying is what all us Bitcoiners were saying anyway, but also backing it up with billions of dollars worth of buys. So he gets a huge audience, and then you just do a bait and switch, and then suddenly start, shilling government talking points and propaganda, and then basically manipulate your audience now to be, co-opted down a government narrative, but under the guise of Bitcoin. That's the worst case scenario. But then there's the middle one, which is just greed. And what the Max was calling him out for was going, MicroStrategy, by far, the actual software they sell is near like nothing of their valuation now. It's all about the Bitcoin they hold. And he's talking about Bitcoin banks and, never sell your Bitcoin, just loan against it and stuff like that. Is that what his overall play? Is he not rich enough? Is he going, self-custody isn't a thing because he's about to bring out a product and switch MicroStrategy into becoming a Bitcoin bank, and he wants to encourage people to send him their Bitcoin so you can loan against it, take mortgages out against it, and all that type of stuff. So he's
so
trying to
that
get
he
out
can
of
be in control of even more Bitcoin.
Yeah, and make even more Bitcoin off lending you money off your Bitcoin. But that just feels a bit weak to me if it's literally just a marketing ploy, because there's so many ways of doing it that would be so much more effective, especially into the Bitcoin market. But again, like, people are going, oh, it's not aimed at you. This interview was to the normies. It's aimed at them. They don't want to be messing about with hardware wallets. They want to just hold their Bitcoin on an
No,
exchange.
because
You go,
his word is too strong in the Bitcoin community. So whether he's speaking to the average Joe or Bitcoiners, people hang on each and every word that he says. So we can't differentiate between who he's talking to. It means everything for everyone.
You'll need to unlock your iPhone.
Oh well, we'll just have to leave Saylor. See what I've seen him. He's tweeted a couple of times. He hasn't directly addressed it, but
Oh, we won't let it go. And at this rate as well, he's not being invited to Bitcoin Conference 2025.
do you know he's been uninvited?
No, I just feel like he won't be welcome. He can turn up, but
yeah,
he'll be getting the comedy boos
Oh,
when
yeah.
when he comes on stage unless he of course addresses it. This is what I mean. He's like literally the Bret Hart. Like, you can walk down the ramp, but when you walk down the ramp, you expect the rubbish and the trash and obviously all of the every swear word in the dictionary to be thrown at him.
Yeah. The challenge we've got on it is, it's like when he did the comparison to Bitcoin and the dollar and saying that they could both coexist. He almost, if it is like a reverse Trojan horse, which is like, Bitcoin's a Trojan horse in that example, where you're just going, no, don't make it obvious that it's the enemy, play it down. That's what people think it is with this. If that is what he's doing, and clearly you can't tell us that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
So it's just this really frustrating thing where he doesn't ever tend to talk on it again. He says these things and then just goes back to his Bitcoin spiel, and seemingly never, the way he answers questions, he's very hard to pin down because he doesn't answer short and sharp questions, does he?
No.
Everything is a 10-minute, essay. So
Can we also just address the fact that, he's not married, there doesn't seem to be a significant other, and he openly said that he will be leaving his Bitcoin to the universe. Now, when he says this, what does he mean by that? Like, is he actually going to be giving it to the government? Because again, maybe that's also a play, kind of saying, look, I have no one to leave this to. If you just leave me alone in my lifetime, then you guys can take this afterwards, and therefore you'll own a significant proportion of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think he said he's going to leave it to MicroStrategy largely, and then it was just going to keep funding. But even yeah, like you said though, it doesn't make sense. Like, what is the point
No.
in stacking up all that money? Like, money is there to be spent, right? You know, the whole point of Bitcoin, of course, you know, we talk about stacking sats and hodl and stay humble, and obviously this is a once in a 500-year opportunity to buy the new form of money that will be relevant for 500 years. This is the gold rush, but it's the Bitcoin rush.
But it
All
is
that's
to
true.
eventually spend it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have to like, the whole point of like why fiat is so bad is that
Mm.
forces you to be in work and it's constantly eroding your earnings. You can't save it because it will erode. You have to keep working pretty much till death. The whole good thing about Bitcoin, and already Saylor is clearly in that position times about 1 billion. He is free to do whatever the fuck he wants with his time now.
Yeah, and it's ultimately low time preferences, willing to invest in this asset for the future. We're willing to do all this reading, have all this faith in an asset to become the soundest money which we've ever known.
Yeah. So you use Bitcoin to buy your time back. You know, fiat is designed to only buy the weekends back. And then by the time the week rolls round, you got to go back to work and another week's worth of money. And you know, it's designed to make you live paycheck to paycheck. And it rolls perfectly onto the next story, right? So we've got Italy, who are in the news, who has specifically brought out a new form of tax, well, at least actually needs to be historically accurate. They haven't brought it out yet. They're proposing it, but it looks very, very likely that's going to come out. And they're specifically targeting Bitcoin here. So they've upped their capital gains from 26% to 42%.
A bit of a question on this one because I haven't checked, but didn't Norway up their capital gains recently?
Yeah.
And they believe that it would create billions more revenue, but end up costing them more money because everyone just left through all the loopholes around the exit tax.
Yeah,
so like the people who they were targeting were the people who can get around that exit tax and they just went fuck off.
Yeah, I think there was a random rich tax. I think it was like a 2 or 3% just on everything, and they thought it was going to raise 150 million for Norway, and instead
I think it's way more. I think it's like 150 billion. I don't think it's 150 million.
Yeah, you'd have to have a look because
And
I think Norway's a small economy, right? But I know the numbers were 150 something, but instead, because so many people left to avoid it, they end up losing 500.
They'd even set up an exit tax in order to stop people leaving. But these type people, they have access to the best accountants, the best tax planners, and offshore accounts.
Yeah, it's annoying because like those type of people can avoid it, but it's for like it is the average pleb. It's like if you don't have a million or two to spend, you're getting around a tax law, then you have to pay the tax because unless you can pay 1 million to do this, because quite often to get around these loopholes, what you have to do is set up companies, employ people, actually have some form of like half legitimate business somewhere, and you just like these shell companies and employees that will sign documents are all just available, but they cost money. They cost significant money. But if you're a billionaire and this new tax is about to cost you 300 million, then it's worth spending 1 million to get past it. Whereas for the average pleb, you know, your entire tax bill will be less than 1 million, so it's not worth spending 1 million to get
you do hear
away
people
from
say, "Oh, you got all this money, you should pay more tax," but it's just like the government doesn't need any more fucking tax. You know, like I'm paying tax on my income, I'm paying tax on my house, I'm paying tax on my car, I'm paying tax on my shopping, I'm paying tax on my energy, I'm paying tax on my fuel, I'm paying tax to the fucking council for God knows what now.
Preach.
And yeah, I've got all these various taxes. It's like the heroin addict wants more heroin. The issue isn't that they're an addict, it's that people aren't giving more heroin. And it's just like maybe we need to like look at that again and say maybe the government's got a spending issue and we shouldn't have so many services centralized as we do.
Yeah.
Fucks me off.
You just reminded me of the book, of course, which we both read, Daylight Robbery, and it's exactly that, isn't it? It's daylight robbery in terms of all of the taxes the average person pays, and they still don't believe that it's enough.
You hear like, oh, the rich should pay more, and it's just like, no, the rich shouldn't pay more. And like, you know, it's not even me saying, oh, Biggs, I'm a millionaire, because I'm obviously not, because I still work. It's just there's too much tax being paid, there's too much bloat, there's too many parasites lying around, but still they want to up it, rather than going, you know what, let's cut the government back by 60% like Argentina, because it's got a bit fucking ridiculous, hasn't it? And to think back, with America, it all started because we taxed them, what was it, 4% on their tea imports?
I think it was like 3%, maybe.
Yeah.
Even, yeah.
And instead, they're like, oh, government, I want to be taxed more than 50%. Please tax me more.
Obviously, in the UK, it's rumored to be doing the same thing, right? We're going to go from 20% cap gains, and this isn't just on Bitcoin, it's on everything, to 39%. So the same thing's kind of happen, you know. Obviously, I rarely go on LinkedIn, but I went on the other day, and it's just full of posts from people that have companies, you know, share options. Because basically, if you sell a company, there was some guy, I think he was the founder of Brewdog, and he's now a VC investing in a load of companies, and he's got a company that is about to sell for 100 million, and it's not going to close this year. It's going to be next year. So they're already looking at moving the location of the company outside of the UK in anticipation of this. And what would happen in the UK as part of that, if that had just gone through as normal and this new capital gains wasn't coming in, the government would get 20 million out of that 100 million pound sale. But now they want 40 million. So
yeah.
In reaction to that, they are moving the company and locating it somewhere that has zero.
So
you might as well, if you're going to move it somewhere, you might as well go to zero, right? So
Yeah.
it's now, because it's worth 20 million. So now suddenly going, oh, but that's going to be such a headache to move the whole company and all the legals, all the financials. Yet we're about to lose 20 million if we don't. So let's spend let's spend 19 million on it, because fuck that, you know. And so it'll be the same thing.
Yeah, because if things get delayed, then if things get delayed, then it will be the 40, and they'll achieve it that way anyway.
So for that extra 20% taxes, what do you get? Do we get more roads?
Exactly.
Who knows?
Like I said,
that we've been promised has already been walked back. So it looks like we get none of the things we were promised, and all the taxes that we were promised that we wouldn't be getting.
It's like we won't give you anything more, but what we'll do is we'll monitor your chickens and we'll space out your bin collections more. So instead of every 2 weeks, it's now every 4. That's what we'll give you for this extra tax.
Yeah.
It's laughably bad, isn't it? Because obviously we've talked about it numerous times. Like, what is this really about? You know, it's the progression to socialism, right? It's getting harder and harder to make your own money, and eventually you end up in 100% tax land, where it's like, look, you technically just don't earn money anymore. We will give you the food and the shelter and the resources you need. All the money is centralized.
But you wait, but that lasts for a very short time before it falls on its arse, because you have no means of production, because no one has any motivation. I've got my UBI, I've got my stimmy, mate. I'm not coming to work because I'm going to use my stimmy. When it's like, oh yeah, now everything costs more than your stimmy check because there's no means of production.
Yeah, who's going to invent the next big idea? Who's going to work 20-hour days to start a business? Who's going to do the really dangerous jobs? Everyone's just going to go, well, what's the easiest job on the list? And you know, when you talk to these socialists, they'll go, oh, you've just got a really negative view. Like, it's just because you're lazy doesn't mean everyone else is. It's like, you do know this experiment has been run multiple times. If humans don't have the incentive that more work equals more reward, they will end up just coasting to do the bare minimum.
You've got examples everywhere where they've tried it with central planning, socialism. So like Russia, they put the farms in the state. What the hell's that?
My phone.
where they put it under state control with the farms, and basically because no one was like, I'm not fucking doing that, so they didn't produce anything. So literally they ended up with no production, bread lines, which were, well, they barely had any bread, and a starving population. And that's what we'd be revisiting again, unless we actually turn full capitalism. Because I think we've got to tear out the government in every single country.
Yeah. And it feeds perfectly into the next story yet again, right? Because here we are, right? So we're talking about that, and it's like, oh, that sounds, doom and gloom. But what's the alternative, right? And well, that is the alternative, I guess, that the fiat world and that slow descend into socialism, which we know does not end well. They also know it's not going to end well, but that's their only option. And look at how they've managed to kind of write the narrative for Bitcoin, which this is from the ECB, so the European Central Bank. This isn't any old paper written by any old idiot. This is stamped by the ECB. And Bitcoin, one of the great lines from it is that early Bitcoin adopters steal economic value from latecomers. I strongly believe authorities would use the Luddite argument to enact harsh taxes or bans. So there's a great thread here by Ter Demeister. It essentially just goes, Bitcoin is unfair because if you get in early, you make profit, and it punishes the latecomers, and that is bad. And
this
only
is
thing that's ever happened with is Bitcoin, so we need to stop Bitcoin.
Well, we're kind of going to socialism, capitalism, because capitalism rewards the first, doesn't it? And that's fundamentally what the world works on, because there needs to be an incentive. So, like, if you were first to the party, then you're rewarded, and you were the last, you're not going to be rewarded. But ultimately, if there's a Bitcoin standard and you want to be paid for, I don't know, putting up some shells, you're paid a standard, and you kind of go, that's my time. And in that time, I need to make sure my family's fed. I need to make sure there's a roof over the house. I need to pay for the water, the gas. So you come up with your fee. So every year, once you're on a Bitcoin standard, it doesn't matter. Obviously, there's going to be some people who are going to get rich because they're there first. But going forward, you kind of go, well, I've done these jobs. I know these are my costs because I haven't got to worry about inflation anymore. Like the price of a carrot is a carrot unless there's a bad harvest one year. And TVs are going to be deflationary because every year the technology is going to improve. So I end up with a really shit off TV every year, or it's become cheaper every year. One of the two, and it's the same with cars. Mass production means a car should be cheaper every year, unless there's something super fantastic about it. And so, like, I think the article is just a pile of shit. And I think you've linked into Jürgen Schaaf, who was linked to the ECB as well. And he comments, I think it's him who says, the original promise of Nakamoto to provide the world with a better global means of payment has not materialized. Or is it the previous one? Actually, it's the previous one, sorry. And I kind of went, it's a twist on the word. So it says, a better global means of payment has not materialized. So it's one of the first sentences. You kind of go, it's never intended as its main means to be payment, wasn't it? Was it? Otherwise, they would have just done an XRP. It's to be a better money, so that people aren't bankrupted or dragged into poverty by inflation.
Yeah. Well, it's one of them. Like, it's obviously to be a better means of payment than fiat. Clearly, that needs to go through the network effects of being widely adopted, and we're only 14 years into the adoption curve.
But
so
it talks about payment, but like I said, it isn't payment; it's money.
Yeah.
Like they twisted the words to put it into their argument.
Yeah. And who knows? Like, you could have said the same thing about gold and said, "Oh, gold is not a payment mechanism. It's too volatile and not enough people accept it." You've got loads of countries that still accept all these other currencies. It's not the standard. You just judged it on year 14. Come back in 20 years, and then gold is now the standard and is used as payment. And so it'll be the same for Bitcoin. We just need to build the rails, but
it has also got some right nuggets in there. So apparently, most economists argue that the respective bubble will eventually burst. I'm pretty sure I've read this one before. I'm pretty sure I've read the
every 4
tulips.
years Bitcoin dies, right?
Yeah. It's dead. Bye-bye, Bitcoin. It's like, oh, it's come back. Oh, shit, it is The Undertaker, isn't it? Staying on our WWE theme. And then we've also got Bitcoin does not increase the productivity potential of the economy. And I'm kind of going, it does, because it means we kind of move to a solid currency where people know what the costs are. If things are too expensive, they'll try and make it cheaper rather than printing more money. So it does create incentive to be more productive. But what I think the person's confusing on is because you see this GDP growth every year. It's like with the UK. Am I right in saying for the last 5 years we've had positive GDP growth, haven't we?
Yeah, largely. Yeah, they always say that, and it's just.
But this is it,
inflation.
because if you think of the currencies inflated by 20% and we have 1%, actually we've been deflationary by 19%, haven't we?
Exactly.
Correct.
So it's actually a lie. So this is one of the points which went, it's actually just fake growth. So it does make things, it, like I said, you kind of go, these are my costs. Once I can cover my costs, I can do my critical thinking, I can do these inventions, and that's where you start to come up with the real talent, the real kind of like discoveries coming through. What else we got in here? Talks about early adopters, and I'm kind of going, but if we look at fiat land and we look at some of these big families, the family who can't be named, good old sausage fingers and his inbred family, who owns all the fucking land? Sausage fingers. And who owns all the land? Duke of Westminster. And you're kind of going, oh, early adopters, are they? So it's it doesn't really back itself up. When you've got oil companies, you've got the gold rush, you've kind of got things like you can apply this to the chips. So like the early adopters for companies like Nvidia and the one in Taiwan, I can't remember the name of it. But they're all early adopters, aren't they? And it's based around assets. So it's just a nonsense article.
Yeah, it's so bizarre because obviously you can replace Bitcoin in that thing and replace it with property, replace it with any stock on the stock market, replace it with the word gold and go, oh yeah, this thing is not fair on everybody because it goes up when the supply and demand dynamics apply to it. This thing is valuable, and not everybody realized it was valuable at the same time. So therefore, it's unfair on the people that realize it late. That's the world. That's everything. Can we reset house prices all back to a tenner, please? That's never going to happen because clearly they wouldn't stay at a tenner for very long, would they? Because straight away, I buy a house for a tenner. It's like, do you want to buy it off me? How much for? 200 grand. Back to normal. It's just like everyone just gets a house for a tenner and then it straight away goes back to the same price. Same with the stock market. Or if you reset Bitcoin to £1, all that would happen is these morons would buy a load of Bitcoin for £1 and then straight away go, well, okay, I want to buy a Bitcoin off you. How much? About 55k. Oh, right, the price that it was originally. So now the problem is you didn't profit from it, not the latecomers. You mean you didn't make enough.
It sounds like a typical socialist argument, doesn't it? Where it's just like, oh, why can't we have this? I want a farm. It's just like, you want what other people have paid shitloads of cash and broken their back to get. And you want it for free, don't you? And this is fundamentally what it is. And we kind of go, WorldCoin, was that what it's called with the eyeball scan? The premise of that was this, that everyone should have like a coin. And then it just went to shit because it's just, well, crap. And also they're trying to scan your eyeballs to have a big record of it.
It also reminds me of the article why the yuppie elite don't get Bitcoin. And it's because they intellectually can't accept the fact that they didn't get it before. And now that they do get it, it's like, oh, right, well, we'll either poo-poo the idea or we'll just, try to somehow reset it, which won't obviously happen.
I think they talk about this by people like going against it or making legislation. It's like, imagine making legislation against code or expression. Good luck.
Yeah.
But, I think my kind of like ending comment about this is, imagine having no real argument, everything which could, is very, very weak, and publishing this. I'd be embarrassed if I published this.
Well,
It
it's the
genuinely
only futile thing that they can do, isn't it?
it's
And just remember, kids, 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin.
these it seems to me like every 6 months these ECB articles just come out, and they aren't embarrassing. I mean, they've done one on how it's bad for the environment, one on how it enables crime.
KPMG said it was ESG compliance.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
holding on to that.
It's these same few fellas. Because that's the thing. Like, I think they were actually a KPMG. Though, to be fair, I think that was actually a genuine research piece that someone had done. Going, I want to find something out. Clearly, the ECB, head of the European banks, right? Of course, they are not writing these pieces to find something out. This is not research. These are, propaganda pieces
It's a
trying to
hit
slag
piece.
off its competitor. But they're embarrassingly bad, though.
I saw
'cause it's
something.
so easy to like just turn that on its head and go, what are you talking about? Bitcoin's bad. And by the way, in that article, it actually alludes to the fact that Bitcoin could go to $10 million per coin, and that will be a disgusting like transfer of wealth to these Bitcoiners. And you just go,
Yeah.
the ECB, what are you talking? Thanks for pumping my bags. Because if I'm reading that article as a normie, you go, oh yeah, those mean Bitcoiners with all that money. Hold on, what's the price of Bitcoin? What? So you're telling me it could go up for 20x from here? Oh, but maybe instead of being sad that I lost so much money by not buying Bitcoin, maybe I just counter that argument and just buy some Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Just
jump on the
board.
bandwagon.
Yeah, because we've all had this moment where we kind of went, oh shit, I should be buying some of this. I can't believe I didn't buy it 5 years ago. When Mr. Olin said to us, and then we had the realization like 5 years later. And I suppose Mr. Olin, when you were reading about it, but you hated it initially, and it's I suppose being humble enough to actually admit you were wrong.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think there's a lot of propaganda now. But I think like articles like that, I'd love actually to just, any of our people that we know that if there are investors, like let's just assume they're investors already, but not Bitcoiners, read that article that is clearly anti-Bitcoin and just see what they think at the end and go, was that a legitimate paper against Bitcoin now? Do you think that's a legitimate argument against it? Because I don't think anybody with a thinking brain that knows about investing can read that and go, oh yeah, that Bitcoin's bad because of that. Because number go up. Like what the hell are they
Yeah.
talking about? It's so long-winded. The thing's 29 pages long, and that's all it's talking about. Right, number go up. That is bad. Things should not go up in value because it leaves out. Not everybody got in at the beginning. You're like, if everyone got in at the beginning, there's nowhere for it to go. Right? It's like that is how free market works. Yeah, you have to have. There's some early adopters, then there's the early majority, the late majority, and the laggards. Like that trend happens with technology, it happens with stocks, it happens with money, it happens with literally everything. And if you want to increase your wealth or be at the cutting edge of technology and have the latest things, then you know that you have to take risk and jump on things early. Because there's so many things. This is the thing, isn't it? It's like a VC investor. They're on the ground floor. They invest in all these companies. The upside is absolutely huge. They invest in very small valuations of companies, but 99% of them fail and go to zero. Right. So it's very easy to go, oh, it wasn't fair. This guy got his 10 grand into Uber and now he's got 100 million. That's so unfair. No, he took a very risky bet and it paid off, 10,000x. congrats.
It's always easy to look at it afterwards, though, isn't it, when it's all a success, as
Yeah.
opposed to the hurdles in between, because God knows how many hurdles that we've had in Bitcoin already, each and every time that Bitcoin has crashed. And we've spoken about FTX and
I was
now
going to say,
even,
very easily with all of us, we could have bought a shiny new car or something,
yeah.
or put it into the S&P. So I kind of feel like I've had so many people say, what went down? You still got your Bitcoin? I was like, yeah, I've still got my Bitcoin. And they're like, aren't you worried? I'm like, no. I was just like, no, it's still got the same principles. It hasn't been diluted. One Bitcoin still equals one Bitcoin. We're like, will be worth nothing. I mean, it just comes up to 50 grand. I was like, got something to say? Oh, you're just lucky, aren't you?
Yeah, you got lucky.
You're just lucky. You're just lucky. Well, what I don't get as well is when people say, aren't you worried? I'm like, well, no, I'm worried for you.
Yeah.
I'm worried for you not being in this. And I know it sounds like I'm not gloating, but like I'm genuinely thinking you don't get it. Like I'm on the right side here, and I'm worried for what you are doing because my argument is just give me a currency that hasn't failed,
Well,
and you're continuing to put
Just
your
give me a
faith
currency that
in
I was
hasn't
going to say,
currency.
halved in value the last 10 years.
if you're really sorry for this person, though, you could always give them a job cleaning a boat on your boat.
So true.
Because it is hard to sometimes we say stay humble and stack sats, but sometimes you just gotta be like, how could you be 100% Bitcoin? Me. God, big balls, baby.
Big balls.
I think this is the point where you just need to cut to and just have the music playing out with balls flailing around everywhere. I just don't think we can really comment on this.
It says it all for itself, doesn't it, really?
Sometimes you just gotta have fun sometimes, haven't you? And you just got to shit post because there's so much bollocks that get thrown Bitcoiners' way. And sometimes
Right.
it is, it's just you can try and argue back but sometimes just the have fun staying poor comment or I've just got big balls is all you need to say. Yeah,
Never
sometimes you're just
grows old.
exhausted, aren't you? You're like, I'm not here to fucking save all of you. Some of you are gonna have to do the work on your fucking own. Just see you on the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll get it eventually. You might not get it until it's a million a coin, 2 million a coin, 10 million a coin. But you might get it at 55K. You might get it at 75. You might get it at 100K. But but you could have got it earlier. And instead you just wanted to either dunk on me or ask me silly questions where you didn't really want an answer. So sometimes you've got to walk around with your big balls and be like, shut up.
To your point as well, rather than reading the article to somebody who invests, the 29 pages for someone who invests, the 8 or 9 pages of the Bitcoin white paper to someone that is intelligent enough to actually get what this is in terms of it, should get it from that alone. Because when you read it, you can't not understand it and not then pay attention to it because it quite clearly lays out the reasoning behind it and to have a peer-to-peer no middleman currency because there's 3 types of moving currency and moving money has always been something since, as we've said, the beginning of time, regardless of what that currency is, whether it's yapstones or beads or whatever form of currency humans amongst us all agree on. But at this moment in time, you've got business to consumer, you've got business to business, and then you've got consumer to consumer in terms of like the transportation of money. And I really do feel like that consumer to consumer transportation of money is just going to grow exponentially. At the minute, it's always, of course, well, typically business to consumer via a bank, and that is now fading out when you've got things like the Lightning Network and, of course, Bitcoin and obviously other crypto transactions that are in there as well. But people realize, oh, hold on, I don't need anybody else. And I think it's just the future. All of our kids will just see that as the norm, and they won't see that a third party is needed to be involved. But going back to the point of, essentially just reading those 8 or 9 pages off the Bitcoin standard, sorry, the Bitcoin white paper is enough.
Sweet. I think
Let's
we're
go
done.
on. That is it. So there we have it. Once again, another podcast brought to you by the 4Bs. Bullish Bitcoin Banter and Bullshit, brought to you by Mr. All In, aka the $1 Trillion Man, Dr. Evil 10%, aka the People's Champ, myself, So Never Look, aka the Excellence of Execution, and Mrs. No Show. Once again, turning in an excuse card with no excuse. A blank excuse.
Eating trifle.
Eating trifle. You never look at a trifle pot the same, will you? Never. I don't know what was worse, the pig's balls or the trifle to win the show.
Oh,
Peace.
well, it is.